decision has now been made and they can get on with it.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Defence and asks, what announcements has he made regarding the security implications of climate change?
The Honourable Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the question. Look, earlier this year, the Coalition Government released its Strategic Defence Policy Statement 2018, which recognised the impact climate change will have on defence operations, particularly in the Pacific. Therefore, it stood to reason, Mr. Speaker, that we needed to look closer and understand the human security defence implications of climate change. Consequently, today, the Honourable James Shaw and I released a document called The Climate Crisis, Defence Readiness and Responsibilities. It's available. This assessment explores the implications of climate change for New Zealand Defence Force operations. It identifies climate change as one of the most significant security threats of our time and one that is already having adverse impacts both at home and in New Zealand's neighbourhood.
Supplementary. What does climate change mean for defence?
Mr. Speaker, with changing weather patterns, we're seeing an increasing frequency of more extreme and violent weather events at home and overseas, particularly in the Pacific. Our requirement to respond is only going to increase. The assessment released today also identifies real security impacts may arise over the longer term, including vulnerable populations losing their economic livelihoods, increased food and water scarcity, malnutrition, increased droughts, increasing competition for resources and population displacement leading to land disputes, and changes in the Southern Ocean which will require us to adapt how we are able to operate in that theatre. Mr. Speaker, Defence will need to equip and train and prepare so that it can respond adequately in times of crisis on a far more frequent basis.
Supplementary.
On the basis that we don't have another thesis.
What are the next steps following the release of this report?
Mr. Speaker, Defence is working to have an implementation plan in place next year. Defence Force will also start planning for increasingly concurrent operations in the South Pacific due to the impacts of climate change. Already the report is actively informing a review of the Defence Capability Plan, which I hope to release next year. And following the release of the Capability Plan, it will continue to influence the capability procurement decisions we take this term.
Question number 10, Dr Shane Retty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Health,